right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's been a long time, but we are here. We're alive. It is another episode of Literally Me. We have made it. Well, I guess we're going backwards, so it's really not that far of a stretch. But we made it 2015. Today, we're going to be talking about The Big Short, and as always, I am joined by my boy Dino. How you doing today?
Well, I'm still recovering from the sadness of the Super Bowl loss, which took a lot of out of me, and that kind of broke my heart. But I'm here, I'm doing all right, holding up, so I'm excited to do this.
Amen. The movies will never break your heart. Well, maybe they will sometimes, but not as bad as a football team.
No, nothing can break my heart as much as that
That's
loss. But
true. That's
yeah,
true. Well, before we get into it, is there any we have any like film related news or any, kind of anything coming up in the media that we can talk about before we hop into The Big Short?
well, I don't have any news, but there's something that I kind of noticed in like the last couple of weeks that I'm very excited about, and I want to hear your opinion on it because I
Okay.
kind of noticed that we're sort of entering a renaissance of like old school horror films, especially like the Universal horror
Yeah.
films, because they're slowly making a comeback, it seems. Have you noticed that as well?
I mean, we got Nosferatu coming out this year, which isn't universal, but classic
But
horror.
yeah,
We have the Wolfman, which is that still going to come out this year?
I'm not sure. I don't think they've like updated us on a release date, just that Ryan Gosling and Derek Cianfrance aren't a part of it anymore,
Yeah.
which sucks, but they have like a great
Still in good
actor.
hands.
Yeah,
Christopher Abbott is one of my favorite actors out right now, like probably top
mhm,
5. He's incredible. And then is it Lee
which
Winnell who's directing it now?
it is, which I'm not like
He's
super into because I didn't like the Invisible Man remake he did.
Oh, really?
I'm not a fan of like that style of horror, like that modern, very like sharp looking, very clean, realistic horror because give me some weirdness, like those films, they're not weird enough. They're like they just I don't know, for me like they just rely on like jump scares too much. But I want like
Uh,
weird horror. I want like give me a weird lab. I don't want because the thing I remember from that film is like his very like rich house, like his like the
yeah.
insane like house are very like modern, and that just looks boring to me. Like give me a weird lab. Give me like heads in a jar. Give me like something weird. I need that sort of weirdness, which is coming back, which I'm excited for.
Yeah.
Like Nosferatu
And
looks
it looks
weird.
insane.
Yep.
And I will say in defense of Lee Winnell, I guess,
Mhm.
he did direct prior to that, maybe one of my top 10 favorite movies of the 21st century, of the 2000 of the last like 5 years or so. It's definitely up there. A movie called Upgrade, which
Yep.
I believe you've seen. I know we've talked about it briefly in the past. That you've seen it, right?
I've seen it, and it's a great film. Like he is a great
It's a
filmmaker.
Yeah, and I felt like with that movie though, he did kind of show that he has that sort of inkling to incorporate some weird shit because it was very modern and kind of the same thing now that I think about it. Very futuristic, modern technology, modern homes, modern appliances, furniture, all that, very clean, very rich. But at the same time, he did kind of almost get into that weird labby sort of thing in Upgrade as
He did.
well with that like
Yep.
Elon Musk inspired character.
That's true, and I have hope for it. I don't like these like more modern horror films because they just look too clean. It's like give me something dirty, give me something weird. I need more of that. And I think like Robert Eggers, for example, like The Lighthouse. Look at that film. Like that film, just the way it looks, it's so stylized. And
Yeah.
Nosferatu is gonna be insane. And yeah, so like there's the Wolfman, like we said, we're getting that. There's a new like Chloe Zhao is making a Western sci-fi Dracula film.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Sounds insane. Then Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan, that was like actually the news that made me think about it. They're making like a new Dracula like vampire film together where he plays twins, like
Interesting.
Michael B. Jordan plays twins. That's I think all we know.
Interesting. Hold on, I'm pulling it up on Letterbox just to see if it's up
Mhm.
there.
And then we're getting two Frankenstein films. Guillermo del Toro is making one, and we're also getting one from Maggie Gyllenhaal, which is
Is
gonna
that
star
the
Christian Bale as Frankenstein. They just announced that. That was also one of the news that that made me think like we're getting a lot more classic horror coming back.
whoa, I didn't know about that one. I was very stoked on the Guillermo del Toro one
Mhm.
because they casted it so well. They replaced
Yep.
Andrew Garfield with Jacob Elordi as Frankenstein, which I think is incredibly genius. I can't wait to see him as Frankenstein, and I hope these all come out this year. I mean, I know it might be pushing it, but I would love to see these all come out by the end of the year, by October time or so. Um, who's doing this Christian Bale one?
It's Maggie Gyllenhaal, Jake Gyllenhaal's sister.
Oh, Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Yep. Kind of
Damn.
insane. Like the next
Ye
2 Octobers, like even if it doesn't come out this year, like the next 2 Octobers are gonna be filled with like such great like horror films, and I cannot wait for it.
Dude, this cast is
Yep.
absolutely stacked.
Mhm.
Damn,
I'm
they
so
also
excited.
got Peter Sarsgaard, which I believe he's married to Maggie Gyllenhaal, if I'm not mistaken.
Is he?
They got Annette yeah, Peter Sarsgaard, I think he is.
I didn't know.
Um, no relation to Bill and the other Stellan, and what's the one from Infinity Pool I really like? Alex? Alexander.
Alexander
Yeah, Alexander
Skarsgård.
Skarsgård, yeah.
Wait, they're not related? I thought they're like
No, this
all
is
related.
Peter Sarsgaard, and the others are
Oh,
Skarsgård.
okay.
Yeah. Peter Sarsgaard, he's done a lot of really cool. He's a great character actor. He was in fuck, what did I see somewhat recently that he was in? He was in The Orphan. Did you ever see The Orphan? He was the
I did.
dad in that movie.
Okay.
Um,
Heard about that,
but
but
you
I
know
haven't.
him. You know him. I'm sure you've seen him in particular in a bunch. But yeah, no relation.
I thought they were
Jesse
like related,
Buckley,
but I guess the name like different,
they're
so
close. They're
yeah.
close to the name. I think there's a K thrown in for Stellan,
Mhm.
Alex, and Bill, and that whole family. Um, but Penelope Cruz is going to be in this movie. Jesse Buckley, Annette Bening. This is a
Mhm.
crazy cast. This is this actually looks really dope. I had no idea. I'm gonna look up this Ryan Coogler one too because um, a lot of Dracula movies.
Yeah. I don't know if it's Dracula. It might have been just like vampire. I'm not sure because we know so little about it. They said like vampire and he's playing twins. Michael B. Jordan is like playing twins. Like the same.
Interesting.
I'm not sure.
Dude, there's another Frankenstein movie that I think just came out or is about to come out in a couple weeks too. I think it's more of a
Lisa
um
Frankenstein?
Lisa Frankenstein, that's what it
Yeah,
is.
heard about it.
And they're
It
doing
looks fun.
and the Bride of Frankenstein too. Isn't Angelina Jolie or someone doing the Bride of Frankenstein?
See, I heard something about someone remaking that film, but I don't remember.
I'm almost positive, unless this was like some like, oh, I hope this happens. Um, but I'm almost positive. Oh wait,
Because
Maggie Gyllenhaal is Bride
that's
of
what I
Frankenstein.
wanted to say. Like I thought she was making like Bride of Frankenstein, but then I heard it's just Frankenstein, so I'm not sure.
Okay, this says that it's the Bride of Frankenstein remake that Christian Bale will be playing Frankenstein in.
Oh, okay.
But I do remember I do remember them talking about Angelina Jolie, but that might have just been like a dream casting thing. 'Cause she would be perfect for that. She'd
Maybe.
be
But
perfect.
who's playing like Christian Bale is playing
I'm
Frankenstein.
I'm assuming Jesse Buckley, or I'm assuming it would
Maybe
be Jesse Buckley.
probably.
Um, just based on that. Annette Bening, probably a little bit older than the Bride of Frankenstein, and then
Mhm.
Penelope Cruz. That'd be interesting, but I can't. I don't really picture that. But it's
That'd be
funny
interesting.
because all of these movies were supposed to come out like 5, 6 years ago, almost 10 years ago. But then Tom Cruise's The Mummy, which I'm glad we brought this up because the Tom Cruise Mummy was like a huge failure and like
Mhm.
ruined. Like they canceled all this. But last week, actually last Friday, I actually rewatched the Brendan Fraser Mummy movie. I hadn't seen it in like years, like I mean like 15 plus years, like forever,
Mhm.
maybe even longer than that. And dude, that movie really holds up really, really well. I think it's a really good movie.
I
You've
still
seen it,
have
right?
I haven't.
Oh, really? Okay. maybe it's I don't know if it was the time. Okay, I've talked to a couple friends and they're like, never saw it. I'm just like, wait, how did I thought this was like a real integral part of childhood, but also I could see the difference between you being across the pond.
Mhm. Well, here's the thing, like, I haven't never seen the full movie because I saw parts of it when I was a kid because it used to play on TV a lot.
All the
My
time.
parents
Yeah.
liked that film, like, they watched it, like, a lot of times. I think that's one of the films they've seen, like, the most because it just plays on
Interesting.
TV so much, and every time it comes on, they're like, "Oh, let's watch this again because it's a great film." So I've
Yeah,
seen parts of it, but, usually they were like, I maybe wasn't as interested because I thought it would be, like, scary or something. So I saw
sure.
clips, I saw scenes, but I never like watched the whole thing, which I really need to.
I
And
think
mhm,
because I kept thinking about you while I was watching it, because I'm watching this movie, I'm like, bruh, I was like, this is so clearly like an homage to Indiana Jones. It just involves a mummy. But it is literally I would say it's better than more than half of the Indiana Jones franchise. Like this is the third, I think someone said this on Letterboxd, like this is the third best Indiana Jones movie.
I gotta check it out then because I
It's
posted shots of it
very
before, like
indie.
15 shots. It looks
Yeah.
great. And there's actually like I have an image on my phone. There's this cinema, like one organization. They have this screen in the middle of the desert with like chairs built out of sand and
Uh-huh.
people are watching the mummy on there. Like there's this special thing. I don't know where it is. I need to find it.
Damn.
Like they screen movies in the middle of the desert and like I'll send you the image. It looks
Yeah.
wild. I want to experience a film, especially like the mummy in the desert. Like that is just so cool.
You should. It was really good. And I was like watching, I was like, they just don't make like good, like old fashioned, fun for the whole family, good adventure entertainment like this anymore.
Mhm.
Like it's either too much geared towards children or it's too much geared towards adults. But like this
Yep.
is like, oh, this is like a fun no matter what age you are. This movie just rules.
Mhm.
Great, great movie though. But
I need
anyway,
more, I need more of that. And Tom Cruise, like they tried with that remake, which wasn't received well, and that's like
yeah,
where the monster films, like sort of like the Dark
died.
Universe, whatever it was called, like ended. So we had like
Yeah.
a very big dry span. But now, like they're coming back. They're making a
I
comeback,
think I think now that enough time has passed, they're able to sort of look at it and be like, "Oh, okay, we can do this now that it's been like 6, 7 years removed
and people are
from it."
like they're more into like weird shit because Poor Things did really well.
Yeah,
I think people are ready, and like The Lighthouse, obviously. Like I think people are like the general audience are like more ready to dive into like weird horror films again, which makes me
yeah,
excited for the
absolutely,
future.
definitely, I agree. Did you see the Tom Cruise Mummy movie?
I haven't.
I haven't either. I never saw it. I'm kind of interested in checking it out just to see.
Same. I want to see how bad it really is. Like it ended a
Y-
whole like franchise that was supposed to
Yeah,
like come out.
but I feel
Yeah,
like just in general, I'm like Tom Cruise is always fun to watch. Like even if the movie's not very good, so I'm like I feel like I'll still have a good time. And the Mummy's like
exactly.
a cool because and it's surprisingly good in the Brendan Fraser one. A lot of the
Mhm.
CGI actually holds up pretty decently. There's some moments where you look, you're like, this clearly is a video game. Like it literally looks like video game graphics. But then there's others where I'm like, damn, this is actually pretty impressive for like 1999. That's 25 years ago.
Mhm.
So it's pretty impressive. But anyway, I highly recommend that. And for anyone listening who has not watched the 1999 Mummy in a long time, throw that shit back on, dude. I hadn't seen it in maybe 20 years even. Like I hadn't seen it since I was like a kid.
Yep.
Um, so I had a ton of fun, but great movie.
I'll check it out.
But, but I'm excited to see how these new ones turn out, and I'm I'm sad that our boy Gosling isn't going to be in the Wolfman movie, but it's just freeing him up to do more big budget stuff. That's going to make me mad.
It is, but it breaks my heart because he was born to play a role. Like like Dead Man's Bones. His like
Yeah,
I think he has a like song called Werewolf Heart. I think it's called,
yeah,
and
Werewolf Heart. Yeah, great song.
he loves old horror. Like I think that was a passion project of his. And as
Yeah,
soon as like they they kicked Derek Cianfrance like out again because he came in after like the original director left, and then I think Ryan Gosling was like more interested in doing it. And as
Yeah,
soon as they parted ways with him, Ryan Gosling was also like, "I'm not gonna do this."
that's my dude.
He
Loyalty to
probably
the
brought him in,
director.
actually.
He
I could see that.
probably did. He
Yeah.
probably did. And if I had a, do we know why they dropped Derek from the project?
Nope.
Because I could see him and Gosling doing something that is like a deviation from what people would expect and doing something like really kind of somber or more of like a drama,
Probably.
as opposed to this like real genre film. And I bet the studio probably looked at it was like, yeah, nah, like we need some like more mainstream kind of shit. I have a feeling that's what it was.
Yeah.
And Lee Winnell can do that. Lee Winnell can give you the mainstream stuff, but also just make it fun and entertaining. But I think for Wolfman, it would be far more interesting to see a
Most
more, yeah, yeah. But anyway, we do have more Gosling to talk about today, though. Something that he's incredible in, and that's 2015's The Big Short, directed by Adam McKay, starring Ryan Gosling, starring Brad Pitt, starring Steve Carell, starring Jeremy Strong, starring a whole bunch of people. The cast is insane. Finn Wittrock, that dude from
Margot
Past Lives,
Robbie.
or is he in Past Lives? Is that white dude in Past Lives? He's not in Past Lives.
I don't
He's
think
in
so.
another movie like that. Anyway, Joe
Okay.
something I think is his name.
Mhm.
Um, but this is an awesome movie. I know you've seen it one time, or have you seen it multiple times? This movie.
And one time, and it's been a while, and usually what we do, like, usually I rewatch films for this episode, but
Hmm.
it's not available for me. It was available on Netflix for a while, but Netflix has sort of like it's Netflix kind of pissing me off, to be honest, because
Yeah,
I share an account with my girlfriend, and
yeah,
obviously we don't live together yet, and I
yeah.
can't like, access Netflix at home anymore. Like I can only watch it at
Same.
her. I could set it to like my house, but like then she couldn't
Then
watch
she
it.
wouldn't have it. Yeah,
Exactly. So we don't live together yet, so we just have to watch it at her house. So when I'm at home, I can't watch anything on Netflix. I have to wait until I get to her house. And
yeah,
it's frustrating because we share an account. Like we should be able to watch it together, like
yeah.
or like separate, but Netflix don't do that anymore. And Disney Plus is actually like doing that as well. I think next month they're starting to do that. And it's just like
Greedy.
dude, it's so greedy. Like we're going back to the days of cable, which
Yeah, and I get if you need to put a cap on it, like something like, oh, three people can share up to one. Like that's I get that, but to be
yeah,
like,
so
no,
people
one
don't
per
use it.
TV or whatever, essentially, it's just like, bro, I can't even use this fucking app anymore. Then
There were like people they used one account, like 15 people used one account,
yeah,
and like they would have like just the four accounts, but they would all log into one. Like 15
yeah,
people watching. I guess that they're like trying to stop that. But if it's just like two
sure,
or three people, like why?
yeah. Which actually they might do something like that because now that I'm thinking about it, here I'm on a Netflix. Whose is it? It might be my mom and dad's Netflix, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and one TV here, it doesn't work, but I have another TV here where it does work. And I don't quite understand that. But I tried logging into a new TV and it's like you've reached the max amount of whatever. So
Mhm.
maybe they do, at least in the States, maybe they do allow you like three different places to do that. I don't know.
Maybe, but not here
I don't
anymore.
know.
So
So it was on Netflix though over there. You weren't
it
able to
was.
access it.
Yeah, but I don't think it's anymore. Like when I wanted to watch it, I couldn't at my home, and when I got to her, I think they removed it, so I
I
wasn't
see.
able to
Yeah,
rewatch it.
I
But it
see.
wouldn't have done a lot anyways because it's a very complicated film, even though it's made very simple. I'm horrible with like numbers and like
Yeah,
the whole banking world is like that's not my field. So I wouldn't have
yeah,
remembered anything even if I watched it yesterday. So
sure.
we'll just go into it.
Said screw it. Yeah.
And you
And
watched
also,
it
by the
so
way,
many times that you don't even need
I
to rewatch it.
yeah, I've seen this movie, I think 3 or 4 times just in the last year or so.
Mhm.
And also the dude's name is John Majaro. He is in Past Lives, plays the white guy named Arthur.
Oh yeah.
Haven't
Mhm.
seen Past Lives though, still. So I don't know, but I did remember seeing stills that he's in. But anyway, I had to Google that one.
He's the
Um,
husband.
Oh, he's
I
her
think.
husband, like, the main
If
okay.
if it's is the guy with, like, the hair?
Yeah, he's, like, the main white dude in Past
It's the
Lives.
husband, yeah.
Okay. Um, great actor, great actor. This cast is stacked. But, yeah, I've
It's
seen
great.
this movie a whole bunch in the last year. So, yeah, I didn't have to revisit it again. I know it pretty well, and it's a movie that I really, really, really enjoy a lot. And actually, I remember when it first came out in, like, 2015, for a long time, I was quoting as, like, "This is one of my favorite movies ever made." During that time. Since then, I've watched a lot more movies, and that's
Mhm,
changed. But it's still one that I go to quite often. I mean, I really like it, and as
mhm,
the years go on, I can appreciate it more and more because I start to see these actors. The cast is so big. I start to see and get to know all these different actors in other performances and other roles. Jeremy
mhm,
Strong being one of the biggest ones. Where now I look at it and I watch him, I'm like, bruh, I was like, you absolutely just killed this. And maybe
yeah,
we'll talk about him later on in the pod.
mhm,
But just a all around great movie. And I love that Adam McKay did it, which at the time seemed like such a swing. He hadn't done a film like this at the time. He was really mainly doing comedies. I think the nice or not
mhm,
the nice guys. What was that? Other guys? The other guys with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell.
yeah.
He
I
did
know he did
Anchorman,
Anchorman,
Anchorman 2.
which,
Yeah,
like,
Anchorman,
he was
Anchorman 2.
most famous for.
Yeah, which I love Anchorman. I think Anchorman I rewatched that around Christmas or Thanksgiving or something. I was with some family. That really might be one of the funniest movies ever made. Like, the amount of jokes per minute is honestly crazy. Like, you're laughing so hard that you're missing, like, 3 other jokes that come after. It's
Never
truly
seen it.
insane. You've
I've
never seen Anchorman?
never seen Anchorman. Think there's also a second one, isn't there?
Yeah, the second one's ass, but the
Okay.
first one's incredible. It's so funny.
Never, like, really got into that, but I wanna watch it because I like, his directing. I know a lot of people didn't like Don't Look Up, like, the one he
Yeah,
did kinda recently, but I really
yeah.
like that, and I like his style, I like his comedy, and his films usually, they're very, like, big and complex, but they're so well written,
Yeah.
and, I wanna rewatch, I want to, get into his filmography more because I've only seen into, like, Don't Look Up and The Big Short are, I think, the only 2 films of his that I've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend that you watch, um, all of Adam McKay's movies. He also did Step Brothers. If you ever saw Step Brothers with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly. He did a lot of stuff with Will Ferrell. He also did Talladega Nights.
Mhm,
Um, but I think I've seen most of his films except for, speaking of Christian Bale, he did that film Vice, where Christian Bale
mhm.
plays Dick Cheney, George W. Bush's vice president. Um, and that movie's supposed to be pretty good, but I never saw that one.
Yeah, I've seen The Other Guys. Now
The
looking
Other
at the
Guys is good. The Other
posters,
Guys is a very funny movie.
it was
Ava
fun.
Mendes is in that to bring it back around to Gosling.
Yeah, she plays
Um,
the wife, right?
Will Ferrell's wife.
Yeah, which is, like, a big joke in the film.
Yeah, it's hilarious casting. That
Yeah,
was very very funny. Funny bit.
I need to check out Vice. That looks
Yeah,
great.
I do too. That's the only film of his I have not seen.
Mhm,
I don't know why, but yeah, he found himself kind of getting into more quote unquote serious material, I think.
mhm.
Um, and The Big Short was the first one where he kind of stepped away from all those more generic comedies or whatever, which are all very funny. And I don't mean generic in like a bad way, but just, you know what I mean, more of a run of the mill comedy. Um, and The Big Short is so good because it's it's based in reality and there is this real drama, but it never fails to not be funny at the same time. And I think that's one of my favorite things about The Big Short. Do you have a favorite character of kind of those main four guys, that Christian Bale, Brad Pitt, Gosling, Steve Carell? Maybe not the characters because I think obviously given this pod, it might be easy to just say Gosling. But any of those particular groups of characters or storylines or anything that you really prefer in this movie?
But I don't remember, like, Brad Pitt's role all that much, to be honest. What was, like, his thing? What was
He
he again?
was he was kind of a
Weird,
supporting
right?
character in it. Say that again?
He had that beard,
Yeah, he
right?
had the beard and kind of like longish hair a little bit. He was like a mentor to the Finn Whitrock slash what's the guy's name I just said? John Majaro. Like they were like two like partners who were trying to break into the industry,
Mhm,
and Brad Pitt was like a neighbor that like they were neighbors at some point, but he was like ultra successful from like investing and in the stock market or whatever. So
mhm.
he kind of becomes like their mentor during this whole thing. But he's more of like an off the grid sort of like very literally kind of like living off the grid from all that. Like he quit his job um and just enjoyed kicking it at home. But he's really good in it, but he's not in it too long.
Yeah, that's probably why I don't remember him a lot of him, but I think Christian Bale, like his character I really liked because there
Yeah.
was this definitely like this little bit of madness because that person, like you would have to be like an insane like level of intelligence to even notice those things. He was like all
Yeah.
in those numbers, like very intellectual. I think I like that a lot. In Christian Bale's
Yeah.
performance, obviously, like he played the shit out of that role.
Yeah. And it's such a it's in such an interesting performance too because it's sort of meant to ground the entire film and kind of be the center point, which it does, and it does it so well that for me after the first viewing, like I'm so involved in that in particular that
Mhm,
now on all the other rewatches, I almost not that I like it any less, but I probably pay attention or care less about his part, and
mhm.
now I'm way more interested in all these other characters and all these other storylines because he does such a good job of grounding the entire film. It makes it easy to be like, okay, like I'm good on that. I got that. Now I can spend some more time sort of seeing some of the nuances of some of these other characters. So yeah, he's incredible in that movie though, Christian Bale. I think I forgot to mention him up front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have like a favorite out of those, or is like every viewing you like look at someone else in more detail and like someone else more?
I think and this might be a bit of a cheat of an answer because Gosling does then kind of join forces with them, but Steve Carell and his team of like those three dudes that are played by Jeremy Strong, what's that Linklater dude? Is Hamish Linklater? Also no relation to Richard, I don't think.
Mhm,
And then that dude Rafe Spell, who I saw him in something else recently. He's a British actor. He was in this cool horror movie that came out a few years ago. But their whole crew is so good and so funny, and they're very much like tech bros, but in a way they're still kind of like very relatable,
yep.
and or finance bros rather, but are still very like relatable. And the funniest stuff comes from them. And when Ryan Gosling joins them, it's like unstoppable. I'm like, this is
Yep.
just like the best group of like five characters ever, and it has three actors in particular that I love so much. So
Mhm. Just their interaction, like the way they interact, they just play so like play off so well of each other. It's just
yeah,
such a just fun to watch because they're very different in a way. And so like when
oh
they
yeah,
interact, just it's so great.
it is, and the one thing that was cool about this movie that I was just thinking about is like this kind of came out in like during like a renaissance. Speaking of like the renaissance that we mentioned that's coming up now with horror, this was like a real finance film renaissance that
Yep.
was happening because you had The Wolf of Wall Street really was the one that kicked it off. That was 2013. You
Mhm,
had this come out in 2015. I know they made that Wall Street that Oliver Stone movie. They made a remake or not a remake, like a sequel or something. When
mhm,
did that come out? That was 2010. Okay, 2010. And then you also had American Hustle, which
yep,
also had Christian Bale in it, and I think that was maybe also 2013. I think that was
mhm.
or 2015. It was somewhere around there, kind of around the same time
Yeah.
period. Um, and it's funny because they also all kind of use and borrow a lot of the same actors. Like Margot Robbie pops up in The Big Short, and obviously she got her break in Wolf of Wall Street. You have Christian Bale leading The Big Short and also leading American Hustle. Um, so it was a cool sort of time period and renaissance of these. And I think that The Big Short for me, I think holds up the best, even better than Wolf of Wall Street, which is a movie I love. I
Mhm.
think The Big Short might be the best of all of those films, kind of from that renaissance of these finance kind of films.
I can see why. Like The Big Short definitely has a lot of to offer, and I'm glad you mentioned Margot Robbie because her part in this film was actually like my favorite part when they brought her in,
Yeah,
explain like this super complicated, a normal person like wouldn't understand this, and she like thumbs
yeah,
it down so much. Just her and like I think the bathtub, just sipping on some champagne and explaining
yeah,
it
yeah,
was just such a great idea, and to get her to do it is just like, dude, it's so incredible. They were ahead of her time because sure, like with The Wolf of Wall Street, she got her like big breakthrough, but she wasn't at the like level of fame that she is right
yeah.
now.
Oh yeah,
So I think a lot of people going back to see that film, they don't expect her to be in it, and she has like
yeah,
such a
and
fun
especially
role.
not in such a small role. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. She has the
and
best
it's
part,
cool.
in my opinion.
I agree. I love those little moments where they bring in these celebrities to explain because then they do it again with Chef Bourdain, who comes in and
Yeah,
he's in the kitchen and he just analogizes it so well because he's using the food that's in his hands and the leftover fish or whatever to put into the pot, and it's just a perfect explanation written so well.
he's
And then
writing.
Selena Gomez, yes,
You're
Selena Gomez when they're in Vegas doing the same thing but explaining it in relation to I think craps or whatever it is that she was playing.
Mhm.
um, and it was just it's such like you said, just very smart writing, and is
Yeah,
that's Adam McKay's strong suit. Like Adam McKay
yes.
is just such a he's a good director, but he's a great writer. He's an
Mhm.
incredible writer. I'm very envious.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be a great writer to take such a like complex concept and to explain it so well that the average person can understand it in a fun
Yeah.
way. Like that's not easy.
Oh yeah. Not at all. It's really cool, and I really love this movie. Did you see it? When did you see it for the first? Did you see it when it kind of when it came out, or did you see it a little bit later on?
I saw it when I like only had like started my movie journey in that sense where I started
Oh,
like to really get into films. So it was probably like 7, 8 years ago.
okay.
I think around like 2017,
Okay, so
16,
shortly
17,
after it came
18.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When it like,
pretty
it had
soon
only
after it
been
came out.
out for like 2 years maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I saw it around when it came I think I saw it in theaters actually when it came out.
Mhm.
Because I remember I mean, this was such a big deal here. The that 2008 financial housing crisis
Yeah.
was such a big deal and was so prevalent. And I remember seeing with my parents because my parents are kind of sort of in that world. So
Mhm.
it was something that they really related to, and like my mom in particular really loved that movie. I remember,
Mhm.
um, but it holds up really well, and it's not one of those that gets caught up or stuck um in the time that it's in. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's a great movie, and it's I guess technically a biopic when you think about it
Yeah.
about all of these people. And last night, I speaking of biopics, I saw a new biopic that just came out, the Bob Marley film.
Mhm. Yeah.
You, yeah, again, actually, ironically enough, with my parents. My dad is a big Bob Marley fan. He wanted to go see it, so I went with them.
How was it?
Um, and we could talk about it another time, I guess. But
Okay.
it was, yeah, it wasn't good. The dude who plays him is really good. Looks absolutely nothing like Bob Marley, but was very good in it. All the
Yeah.
performances were good, but ultimately a real kind of stinker of a movie. There's no stakes. There's nothing.
Did
Absolutely
your
nothing.
dad
It's like a
like it?
highlight reel. My dad liked it, so that's all that mattered.
Okay.
Um,
At least
but
he
yeah, and it's funny. At least he did. But that's the thing. A lot of biopics are so focused on it being a biopic that it kind of takes you out, and it's hard to really view as anything outside of it, which
Mhm.
Bob Marley did. But The Big Short doesn't because it's one of those where it's like, oh yeah, this is like a biopic and it is involving real people and all this, but it doesn't feel that way. It
Mhm.
feels fictional in a weird way. You know what I mean?
It does, and I think that's where it's like the strong suit lies because they don't push it too hard. Like they don't try too hard to make this like as realistic, although it is realistic, but they also take some liberties, and that
Yeah,
just elevates, I think, the story because there's a lot of like real world stuff, a lot of information, but they also like do it in a like fun, creative way, which just
yeah.
elevates the whole thing and makes it even more interesting that it might have been in real life for most people.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's Adam McKay was the right choice for this, 100%. Um, but to single in on our boy Gosling,
Mhm.
um, I love this performance of his. I really do. It's fun to see him play something a little different than he has played. I can't really think of any other characters that he's played that really reminds me of this role.
Was sort of Crazy Stupid Love, like, his character, I think, like, is a little
A
bit
little, yeah,
similar.
I can see that actually.
Yeah. But apart from that, like, it was very, like, different from his usual stuff.
Yeah, I guess he kinda shares some of that arrogance, I guess, of that Crazy Stupid
Yeah.
Love character a
And
little
his
bit.
style as well.
Yeah, that's true. Um, but I like seeing Gosling in these kinds of scenarios and these kinds of things. Um, where it's not so movie starish and feels more lived in and feels more real in that way.
Mhm,
And he's got a great wig on too in this movie, or I think it's a little wig or something. I don't know what that is.
mhm.
But yeah, he was fantastic in this movie, and it's I mean, first time working with Adam, and only time working with Adam McKay, I guess. But I'm trying to think if he had worked with any of those other people. Well, Steve Carell, obviously, actually, from Crazy
Yeah.
Stupid Love. That
But
was
Christian Bale, I don't think so.
I don't think they've ever worked together. Him and Brad Pitt, nothing's coming to mind that they've worked together on. But it was fun to see him and Steve Carell back in the saddle, but they're both playing like, I guess, like you said, the Gosling is somewhat similar, but
Mm,
Steve Carell's
completely
characters could
different.
not be more polar opposite from
Yep,
Crazy Stupid Love in this.
yep.
It was cool seeing them interacting again and interacting in this way.
Mhm.
Um,
And
and it's
also,
cool
like,
because
for first time, him and Margot Robbie have been they don't interact, but first
oh
time they've been in
yeah,
a movie together.
there you go, there you go. Yeah, I didn't even think about that right there. Um, and it's cool because Ryan Gosling's character, like there is the Christian Bale character that is the reason that this is kind of happening, but Ryan Gosling's character actually is the one who kind of brings everybody else together. Like
Yeah.
everybody else is on board because he overhears this thing
Mhm.
um, from like a pitch meeting that Christian Bale had with someone at his company, and Ryan Gosling is the one who gets Steve Carell's whole team on board and does it accidentally, which is super funny. He just dials the wrong number and they find out about it. And
Yeah,
then by chance also same thing where the Finn Whitrock and John Majaro characters find out about it too, which it's funny because they acknowledge the fact that they're like, okay, this didn't actually happen. Like they look into the camera and break the fourth wall.
mhm,
They're like, now this didn't actually happen this way. We're just doing this for drama's sake.
mhm.
Um, but it all kind of boils down to Ryan Gosling's character sort of setting everything in motion, and without that dude, the whole thing doesn't happen. It just becomes a normal waiting game with Christian Bale, which is why I think it's easy for Christian Bale's storyline to take a back seat because for him it's all the waiting game. While
Yeah.
everyone else is running around, Christian Bale's just sitting back and just waiting.
Mhm. That was sort of, like, really great to see the difference how, like, each personality, how they, like, react to this.
Yeah,
They all have, like, different approach to how to make, like, money off of it,
yeah,
and I
and
really like that.
they'll have their own angle. It's a nice analogy for life, I suppose, in
Yeah.
the greater sense. Um, but all in all, just an absolute great movie. Is there anything in particular that stands out from The Big Short that you want to talk about before we find out how much this character is literally us?
Mhm. So, like I said, those scenes where they bring in celebrities to explain those, I love all of them, and I forgot about the other 2, but I'm glad you mentioned them because
Yeah,
those are just so well written, and I really like that it is self-aware and breaks the fourth wall and just interacts with the audience. I think that's might have been, like, overused later on, but at that time, like, not a lot of films have done it, and I
yeah.
really like that, so those are, like, my main takeaways. What about you?
And I think it works too because some of these other movies just break the fourth wall, like a Deadpool or something, just to be quirky and like fun
Yeah.
and shit. But
Mhm.
like this, it's like everyone's very well aware that this is a very dense topic and not everyone has all this background information. So they're acknowledging it to a point where it's like, hey, like it's all right. You're not alone in that you don't get this because this is an
Mhm.
insane thing to understand. So
Yep.
here is me. I'm going to explain it to you so that way we can move along with the story. Like it's a really cool, inventive way.
And
Um,
they had to do it because otherwise it would be boring to most people.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So another director would have just taken this and just gone with it straightforward and be like, well, I hope people understand. Or if
Mhm.
you don't do the research, then that's on you,
Yep.
which sucks, for them.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, all in all, I don't know that I can pick a favorite moment or anything that we haven't spoken about. There is a great moment where Jared Vanette, the Ryan Gosling character, is giving the presentation to Steve Carell and his team,
Mhm.
and he's like creating this metaphor for what's happening or this analogy by using the what do they call it, Jenga blocks or whatever, where you pull out one little block
Django.
and he's yeah, and he's doing it, and he brought this like Asian kid with him, and he's like, "Yo, this kid here, he doesn't even speak English. All he knows is math." And then it cuts to the kid, like the camera pans over, and he looks into the camera. He goes, I forget what he said, but something along like, "My name's Ryan. Like I'm from Bakersfield, California. I just don't say anything because he told me to. But I speak perfect English." Like it's a very funny moment like that.
Mhm.
Um, and I always really love that moment, and all of the stuff leading up to Steve Carell's team finding out about it, like when they're just kind of talking around and just like locker room talk, like in the office, the three guys, and they have a very funny conversation about something involving like a scrotum or something, and they literally draw it out, like when he does it with his finger, and
Mhm.
they show like an image of it. That's it's really funny. It's a really
Mhm.
unique movie, and a very rewatchable movie at that. I could rewatch
Understood.
this movie every single year.
I need to rewatch it. I can't wait to rewatch it because I think the more you watch it, like you said, like the more things you noticed and you focus
Yeah,
on different characters and different performances. And I think there's just like so much to unpack that you can just rewatch it over and over again.
yeah,
And it's
one hundred
entertaining.
percent.
You never get bored.
Very entertaining. I mean, incredibly entertaining, which is tough to do for subject matter like this.
Mhm.
Um, so before we get into our four films of what we think, our boy Jared Vanette would very much like, I'm curious to know on a scale of 1 to 10 Jenga blocks, how much is this Ryan Gosling character, Jared Vanette, literally you?
I think this is going to be the first Ryan Gosling character that I have to give a zero, honestly,
Interesting. Okay.
because I don't know if I'm like anything like him. You can maybe like go to like a one or something, but honestly, not a lot of connection there, I think. I'd have to
Yeah,
rewatch it. Maybe I remember it wrong, but I don't think he's a lot like me.
that's understandable. That's
Yeah.
understandable for sure.
What
I
about
think
you?
I think I would honestly go and give it like a 5 or something just down the
Mhm.
middle because I can very much relate to his sort of drive, I guess, and schmoozing people in sort of that businessy way, but also not taking shit from people, which he does a much better job of than I. But it is something where I can kind of look at and be like, okay, like I can kind of take some stuff from this and like
Mhm.
apply it to my own life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So for that I'll give it a 5 and just put it in the middle there. Um, but I would say I have more in common with this character than the Gray Man Gosling character. I don't know how many
Mhm.
trains or whatever I gave him, but but there
Well,
should
that's
be
not
more
hard.
for this than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
This one has more
okay.
personality for sure.
Definitely. Definitely.
Mm.
Okay. So speaking of Jared Vanette, this finance stock bro legend king. Let's go ahead and kick it off with you. What's the first movie of
Mhm.
yours that you think Jared Vanette would watch and say, "Hey, that's literally me"?
So the first one I have is one that I talked about last episode. I think I mentioned it briefly and even said that I'm going to mention it again. And that is the 2023 film Tetris, which
Oh, that's right.
you
Yeah,
you haven't seen yet. But just the way this film, because are you familiar with how Tetris came to be?
I don't know any of the history behind the game. I know the game and I love to play it, but I don't know any of the history behind it.
Yeah. So it was the same for me prior. I just knew like it's a popular game. It came from Russia, but that's all I knew. But just how complex and insane this situation wasn't clear to me. So when watching it, it was just like so much information, but it's like funneled very well so you can digest it and you can even
Hmm.
explain it. With The Big Short, I don't think I could explain it to someone else. With this one, I
Sure.
can, but it's also like less like complex than The Big Short. But pretty
Sure.
much so. There was this guy in back then, Soviet Union was in Russia back then, and he was working at this company and he made like the game. But because it was the Soviet Union, he didn't own it. Like he couldn't make money off
Sure.
of it, he couldn't profit. So it was pretty much like this company's thing. And they would send it to other companies in Russia and they would just play it for fun. And then there was this guy who went to Russia for whatever reason and he found out about this game. So he bought the rights for it, like the computer rights, outside of the Soviet Union. And he sold it to like this rich guy and his son. And here comes this guy, and he's American. I think is he American? I think he's American, like Canadian. I don't know. I don't remember where
Yeah.
he's from, but he lives in Japan. He has a wife and kids. Like he's a Japanese wife and kids. He lives there, and he has a video game company that isn't doing very well. And he's at this convention trying to sell his game, and he
And is this
finds
the Egerton character?
that's him exactly.
Okay.
And so he finds out about this game at this convention. He's like, "What is this?" And the guy says, "Like that's Tetris." He's like, tell me something about it. And he explains it to him. He's like, I like who has the rights? And he tells him like he says, I want the rights for Japan. And so he gets into like this bank, like this his banker, and he tells him like I need a loan. He's like, you can't have a loan, you already had one. And he explains the situation to him. And the banker like gives him the money because it's just like this is a big opportunity. And he gets the rights. He sells them to Nintendo. And what I really like about this, like every time the location changes, you have this like 8-bit thing where it's just like the name of like I
Yeah.
don't know, like Seattle or whatever, and he gets the rights. But there's like a whole situation I'm not getting into because I don't want to spoil too much. But he finds out that something's not right. Like something about this isn't right because this guy in the UK, he has like the rights for the arcade, but he wants those, or like he had those. So he goes to Russia, like the Soviet Union, to investigate for himself, which
Yeah.
everyone tells me, like, don't do that because that was at the height of like Russia and America. Like there was still very big tension. But he goes there and he talks to this like company boss, and they like the Soviet Union, they also have like the KGB on it. Like they investigate,
Hmm.
they spy on him, and he goes to them and they talk. And there's this one situation which is one of the best scenes of this film, where the guy who got the rights initially, he's there, but he doesn't know that Taron Egerton's character is there. At the same time, the
Uh,
son of the boss, they're all in the same building. They don't know about each other. And this guy of the company, he knows about all of them and he plays them like a fiddle. Like he goes to Taron Egerton's character. He's like, here's the contract that we gave them. Look at it. And he looks at it and he's like, yeah, see, like he finds out that they sold like they're selling arcade and like handheld versions, but they never got
yeah.
the rights. So he gives them the contract and like read it and he says like, look, you didn't define the word computer because computer could also be like a console, like a handheld version.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's like, how could we change it? Like, oh, you have to specify what you mean with computer. Like, for example, you'd have to have a keyboard. And so he takes the contract. He just walks out. He's like, "Where are we going?" He just walks out. He goes to the next room. To the guy's like, "Sign this." He's like, "I'm not going to sign it. I want the arcade rights." He's like, "You can have the arcade rights if you sign this." He signs a new contract. That way, he loses the initial rights. He goes to the next one. He's like, "You can go. I don't need you." The guy's like, "What do you mean?" He goes back. It's just such a big back and forth, and he plays them so well.
Oh,
And
that's
then
awesome.
it ends with like a big car chase, which is very different from the rest of the film, which I initially didn't like because it starts using like special effects every time the car crashes or like rubs off into another car. The car turns into like those Tetris pixels, And I'm like, am
Oh,
I watching like
interesting.
movie Pixels right now? So I didn't like it. But
Yeah,
then they with the car chase, they do Holding Out for a Hero, like that song, but in
yeah,
Russian.
interesting.
And it's such a great scene. So I know it's a lot right now, but that film just was so creative and I really liked it. And
Dude, you got me really excited to check it out now.
if you have like Apple, I can give you like my login for like Apple TV or whatever. I think it's on there. It's just like, dude, you gotta watch it. I think you could like it because it's just very creative.
Yeah, what's it on? Oh, it's on Apple TV Plus, right?
Eh, Yeah, it's Apple TV Plus, and it's such a wild story that I didn't know about. And of course, they also took a lot of liberties and also like had different things that didn't happen, but it's a wild story.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we like made this into a film.
Oh, dude, that is so cool. I am definitely, because I was really excited when you mentioned it prior, but now that you really kind of got into the weeds of it more, like
Mhm.
that was that really got me a lot more stoked on it. I just added it to the watch
You
list.
like it. I think you'll like it.
Hell yeah, I'm gonna try to get on. I know some friends who have it here, Apple TV, so I'm gonna see if I can steal that. If not, I'll come back to you and
Perfect.
steal yours for sure.
That was
Um,
my first one. What's your?
awesome. Okay, my first one is a movie that I also talked about. I'm pretty positive last episode. And that's the 2023 film by Matt Johnson, Blackberry, about the origin and creation of the Blackberry phones.
Yep.
Um, this is a movie that is so in line with the Big Short, The Wolf of Wall Street's like that kind of shit, but it is it it's so far up my alley that it's hard for me to really think of it in like in a larger grand scheme sort of way of how it fits in, apart from me just feeling and being like, this man would love this movie.
Mhm.
um for those listening who aren't aware, this is Jay Baruchel and Glenn Howerton, of It's Always Sunny fame. They play the two founders. I guess the Jay Baruchel character is the one who actually created the BlackBerry, and then the Glenn Howerton character is the one who is more of a business guy who comes on as the CEO of the company. And it's about the rise and eventual fall of BlackBerry. And it's very, very fast paced in the way that a Safdie brothers kind of film is, and very sort of chaotic in that way. And it's very funny. But at the same time, it really outlines that kind of entrepreneurial struggle and that entrepreneurial grind in a really kind of intense way. Even though I think if it was like a limited series, they could have shown it a little bit more, because the movie in and of itself, I think it's like clocks in at like 2 hours flat.
Mhm.
Um, and it's one of those where I could totally have seen them going for 3 hours, but I don't know if it would have worked in a movie sense without there being breaks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Um,
So,
but it's so well shot and well put together and has just such great performances. And again, to go back and compare it to some of these other more entrepreneurial flicks, I mean, this one really just joins those rankings so seamlessly and so smoothly. And you know, like with Tetris or with any of these, there's so many of these movies that are coming out, and it's easy to make a movie about someone who invented something. You have the founder, the McDonald's movie. You have that Dumb Money movie that just came out recently with Paul Dano about him and the Reddit stock market thing. It's so easy to make these because the content is there, but in order to really stand out, which the Tetris one sounds like it also really stands out with its creativity, BlackBerry really does it in like, but in the opposite way, where it's just like, this is going to be absolutely brutal, because like the low moments are very low, the intense moments are very intense, but at the same time the funny moments are very funny, and it feels very much like a documentary. And it's funny, we will see this theme pop up maybe for the next three films that I choose today. And I think it makes sense given that a lot of these are going to feel documentary like, because The Big Short is based on real shit.
exactly.
Um, but again, I don't want to get into this one too much. I talked about this, I know, last episode and possibly on multiple episodes, because this was one of my favorites of last year. But
Mhm.
Blackberry from last year, great film, great Canadian, one of the best Canadian movies to come out in the last handful of years. Um, very, 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 very good movie, and highly recommend everyone checks it out.
So was BlackBerry a Canadian company? Or like,
Yes,
okay, so I don't know a lot about them.
yeah.
They don't make, do they still make phones? Do they still exist?
I don't actually know if they continue to make new Blackberries because when the film doesn't like come to like modern day, like by the end. Um,
Because now they
let me
dropped
see here.
off. Like they were at a big height back then. Everyone had a BlackBerry phone, but then they disappeared with like Apple and touch screens pretty much.
Yeah. Okay, they are officially defunct and are physically unable to function even if you had an old one.
Okay.
As of 2022. And it's interesting because this movie, like you mentioned Apple and you mentioned all these things, like it feels very Shakespearean in a way. Again, this will come up later, but it feels very Shakespearean in a way because it is this man's stubbornness and refusal to adapt that
Mhm.
ends up becoming their downfall. And a lot of it even it is you would think it'd be on the Glenn Howerton character, the CEO, who's very over the top and very aggressive.
Mhm.
And he has his own faults, and he's a big reason why it doesn't work, but also in this meek sort of Jay Baruchel character, the guy who actually was there creating it. Um, he has a lot of stubbornness and ego to an extent too. That is a big reason why BlackBerry fails when iPhones come out and they think, "Wow, you don't have a keyboard? Like that's a joke."
Mhm.
Every phone needs to have a keyboard, and then understanding that the world was moving away from it, and still refusing to adapt because it would be a sign of weakness, almost in a way, or that you were wrong, or that you're
Yeah.
chasing somebody else who's doing something, and that's not a bad thing to do. You have to adapt to the times, but it showed that their ego got in the way of it, and I mean, it's really it's a sad movie too. At the same time, it really has it all. I think you would really like it a lot. And um, obviously, I was familiar with BlackBerry just from it being around, but in terms of the whole background, I really had no idea prior to watching it.
And neither do I, but I definitely need to check it out. And that's sort of like a funny thing with like these entrepreneurship films or like people in general. They're either like that stubborn that they don't want to change, and that's why they get to where they are and also
Yeah,
fall, or like they're really slick and like adapt so much that they get to where they are because they manipulate their way into it. Like there's always this
exactly.
extreme. So I'm glad we have both of those with our first picks.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
that's true. That's true. All right, pick number two.
So for my next film, I chose kind of an obvious one, but Moneyball, which I had to pick this one, and I know you love this one as well. It's sort
Okay,
of
so
because, yeah,
let me just go ahead and mention I also picked Moneyball, so we can both talk about it
yeah,
now. Moneyball is also one
we
of my
can.
picks. So go
But
ahead. Go ahead and
I
kick
can
it off.
imagine like he's probably gonna pick this one, but I
Yeah.
wasn't sure because I thought maybe you like because usually like you find films that I haven't even seen like thought of. So
Uh,
but yeah, this is just an obvious one because just the way how like it's also very analytical because it's
yeah.
also like this guy who changed like kind of the game of baseball because of his analytic thinking and his numbers, and that's why I think just it just lends itself to have a
Mhm.
connection there. And like if you love The Big Short, you're gonna love Moneyball. Like that's just those films just works like just so great together.
Yeah.
And this is one of your like, favorites of all time, I think.
So it definitely because we probably have talked about this on the pod too. My memory is
Yeah.
so bad, like, and we usually spend a time apart from recording, so I always forget what we talked about previously. But I think we might have talked about this before. I've only seen this movie the one time. I saw it last year for the first time ever. I had never seen it prior. Was well aware of it. Never watched it. I have it on Blu-ray, but
Mhm.
I just always had it, but never actually watched it. And then I
Yeah,
put it on.
I'm starting to remember yeah, dude. Like my memory is
Yeah,
so bad, but I'm starting to remember where you
but I
mentioned that you
put
hadn't seen it.
yes,
Yep.
but I put it on, and it was one of those where I immediately fell in love with it and thought it was incredible.
Yep.
Um, and it has the workings to definitely find its way like into that top 50 list I got on my letterbox. And I feel
Right.
like I didn't rewatch it for this, but I know for a fact next time I rewatch it, there's a very good chance it'll end up. I think it might be one of the best Brad Pitt performances ever.
100%. This is one of his best
It's
films,
so
and
good.
Jonah Hill as well. Like, I love his character
Oh
in
yeah,
this.
he's so good. Philip Seymour Hoffman, even though he's just like doing like this supporting character, and I think he's doing it as like a favor to what's his name, Bennett fuck, what's his name,
Kenneth Miller.
Bennett Jones, Bennett Miller.
Miller.
I think he's kind of doing it like as a favor to him because I think they were buddies, maybe.
Mhm.
But even Philip Seymour Hoffman is so good just as this, coach that's sitting there with his arms folded like this the whole movie. Um, but this movie's so good, and I think it kind of for the same reasons you said. There's this analytical way, and to go back to another point that you mentioned when I was just talking about my previous film is that
Mhm.
this movie is all about adapting and jumping head first into adapting to whatever's new and adapting to the future. So
Mhm.
much so that people begin to doubt you and question you. And that kind of unwavering nature that the Brad Pitt character has is 100% something that this Jared Vanette character from The Big Short and all of these dudes from The Big Short have because they
Yep.
are all, and honestly, especially the Christian Bale character, someone who is so like, I know this will work, and everyone is going to laugh me out of every single room that I'm in, and everyone's going to think that I'm crazy, and the entire population is not going to be keyed in on this. And that can be a tough thing to stand by when you're that far in the minority. And that's exactly the struggle that Brad Pitt's character has in Moneyball. And yeah, like you said, it is very much it's like an obvious one, but in a great way because they parallel to each other so well in that way.
Absolutely. I don't know if you've ever seen like that joke of like the girl who said every like film fan, like male film fan, falls into one of like they have like this triangle. It's like La La
Uh,
Land. There's The Wolf of Wall Street, and I think Scott Pilgrim was the one. Like every
uh,
cinephile falls into some of those, like one of those corners. And I
yeah,
think with these type of films, it's like Moneyball, The Big Short, and The Wolf of Wall Street. Like
yes,
analytic people, they fall into one of those corners. I think those are like
yes.
the corner films, and that's why they work so well. Like for us, I think it's just all of them, pretty much.
I agree. That's a great point. I'm glad that you picked it. That's
Had
that's
to.
that's super funny. That was the last pick that I made. I was really thinking, and I was like, holy shit, it was right in front of me the whole time.
Well, great minds think alike. So
They sure do. All right, well, go ahead and drop your third movie then.
should I, or do you want to go? Oh, because yeah, we
I'll
had
do it since
same.
that was like my second one. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one I picked is one because I struggled with this a little bit because I had two films. Like 10 minutes before we started recording, I only had two. And I couldn't
Uh,
think of another one if my life depended on it. But then one thing popped into my head, and that is the film Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo. Have you ever seen this one?
no, Todd Haynes did this film, right?
Yep.
From
Yep.
like 2020-ish, somewhere around there.
2019.
19, yeah.
Yep. So I picked this film because it's very different from The Big Short in both its style and its tone. It's very serious because it's also about a very serious topic. But the reason why I picked it is because uh, Christian Bale's character, like he knew something other people didn't, and he wanted to like get to the bottom of this pretty much. This is exactly what happens in this film because Mark Ruffalo, he's like an investigator thing. I don't remember if he's like a reporter or if he's I'm not sure where he falls on the character. I
He
think
he's an he's an attorney, I think, right?
attorney, that's it. And so he gets a call that there have been like there's something going on at a farm, like a small town, where there's a company that makes like Teflon. They make like
Hmm.
the thing for like it was in carpets. It was obviously for cooking ware, but it started out like Teflon. I don't know if you noticed, but it was something for tanks. It was made during the World War, so tanks
Hmm.
wouldn't get dirty. And after the war, obviously they were like, "Hey, we have this like this material. We have to make something else. We have to commercialize it. We have to still make money off of it." And they started making like carpets so they don't get a lot of dirt on them. Started like cookware, but it found out that they've been dumping like the chemical thing into the water, and like this farmer, like the animals, like they've all been getting sick of it. and they used to cover up like these tests they would do with pregnant women, where they would like their children would like have some sort of like disability or something because of that, and they cover it up. They give them money, and he sort of uncovers that, and he knows something. He knows something isn't right, and everyone around him is like telling him, "You're insane. What are you doing?" But he just knows. He has this hunch. He goes onto like he doesn't let go, and he goes into like this even this like one crazy scene where he's at his house, and I think his wife is pregnant at that point or something, and he just rips out all the carpet from the ground. He throws out all like the stuff that has Teflon, and it's a very sad film. And I'm not gonna go like into it. I don't want to like spoil
Yeah.
the ending, but it's very like chilling because it's something that a lot of us use, but we don't realize. And it made me throw out like all the pans with Teflon because just how harmful it is to humans. And a lot of people don't know it because these companies, like this company, they're actively covering it up. Like they're making studies that aren't telling the truth. So we don't know about this, but just how cancer, like they're poisoning us with these things. So it's a film I think everyone should check out because we're all affected by it, and most of like us don't even realize it. So this is a
Yeah.
film that you have to check out because you would love it, and just everyone check it out. Please do your body a favor and check this out. You'll be sad, you'll be depressed that this is the world we live in, but you can start to make changes so you're not affected by it as much. Still impossible to be completely unaffected, but yeah, it's a great film.
I have to check it out. It's been on my watch list for a long time. I remember when it came out, I really wanted to see it, and I just didn't get around to it.
Mhm.
And I love Todd Haynes. I think he's one of the best directors like alive. He's so good. And it's funny because the only memory I have of this movie was I just remember reading this thing of him and his DP saying, "This is the first film that we shot digitally." And then I remember Sean Baker on Letterboxd said something about it looking like shit. So I that's the only kind of like memory that I had
Mhm.
of that. And he didn't. Sean Baker did not say that in words like that, but he said
Yeah.
something along those lines.
Mhm. Makes
Um,
sense. It's a very dark
but
film. It looks very dark, but it fits. And speaking of Todd
that's
Haynes, I'm actually
probably.
gonna watch May December tomorrow. Just wanted to put that out there.
Oh fuck yes, yes,
Yep,
one of my favorites of last year. Great movie.
can't wait. But yeah, that was
But Dark
my
Water seems right up my alley. It's like a cool thriller. I'm definitely. It's. I have to
yeah.
rent it. It's not available anywhere streaming, but I might drop 3.99 on it.
It's worth it. I rented it as well because my shout out to my buddy Cam. He recommended it to me. He was like, "You have to
Yeah,
check this out." So I rented it, and it's such a great film.
hell yeah. I might throw that shit on later tonight if I have time. Honestly,
But yeah, let me know what you think. I think it
I will.
might be one. But yeah, that was my
Cool.
third one.
All right. So my third one is going to be the most glaringly, painfully obvious one of this entire, show, and something that I've a program, I guess we'll call it, that I've talked about endlessly on here.
Mhm.
And I think it's impossible for Jared Vanette to not be incredibly in love with Succession, seasons 1 through 4, just in general.
Hell yeah.
It's just, and again, I'll be very brief because I've talked about this show to death on here,
Mhm.
but also, it makes sense. Adam McKay is the producer of Succession. Obviously, like the lead is Jeremy Strong, who is a supporting character in this. And it's so funny. I own The Big Short. I own it physically, but I also own it like on Apple, like on iTunes, with all these like special features. And they have like a behind the scenes thing that's really interesting where like all the character or all the actors are pretty much like interviewed, or like all the director like Adam McKay's talking about all the actors or whatever, and he's talking about working with Jeremy Strong and how Jeremy Strong just spent all this time with all these like finance people, and he would come to set and he would just be discussing finance and discussing stocks with everyone around him. Like he just lived in this character, knew every, like it wasn't that he was just reading lines, he fully understood everything that he was talking about, and essentially like became like what would be like a very like professional sounding like stockbroker, right? Like he
Mhm.
just fit the role, and it's that dedication that you see. He did this for such a smaller sort of supporting role for this, but it's one of those things that just highlights what a real unbelievable talent he is, and he's able to really fully live that over the course of 4 or 5 years in succession. and stylistically they're very similar. You know, the show and the film, um, in terms of the themes and whatever. And this is one of those where it's also very Shakespearean in that it's a tragedy. I mean, it's a straight up tragedy. This show and a comedy. There's a ton of funny parts, but ultimately its structure is this great Shakespearean tragedy, and um, it's it's one of those that shows behind the curtains of the people who are running the big things. And in a way, I feel like our Jared Vanette Gosling character would really love it, is because it sort of exposes a little bit of the corruption. And it's not too corrupt. I mean, it's normal wheeling and dealing with business, and it is going to be shady. That's a part of it. But it does sort of pull back the veil on some of the behind the scenes things. And obviously, The Big Short is very much centered around them pulling the curtain back on actual fraud and corruption. And in succession, you're able to live with all these characters who are on the other side of that curtain. And it really is maybe the best TV show of the 21st century. I think it's one of the greatest programs that's ever been made. And again, like I said, I wanted to keep it brief because I've talked about this show so much on this pod. Um, but it was almost impossible for me to not pick Succession um for this. I couldn't imagine him not loving it.
I love that you like first of all, I love that you picked a TV show because we haven't done that yet. So that's
Yeah.
very cool. But I love every time you talk about because you have such a love and passion for this show. And I still haven't started it. I know I said I will, but I haven't. But I just need to watch it. And I just love every time you talk about it, like I can see just how much you love it and how much of an impact it had on you. So dude,
Yeah.
this is like never apologize for talking about this because I can listen to you talk about the show, knowing nothing about it pretty much for like days.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that because I know for the listeners it could probably be pretty annoying, but I do appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, I've already told you 100 times, you got to get into it. Set aside a couple weeks where you can just fire through the whole thing.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I know you and I were messaging about the show, coincidentally a few days ago.
Yep.
So yeah,
I just need to buy the box set, like because the streaming service
honestly, yeah.
has isn't we talked about it once before and like a while
Yeah.
ago, but I just need to like pull the trigger, spend like $50, just get all the seasons in one and just watch them.
And have it forever because I know once you watch it once, you'll want to watch it again.
And these streaming services,
100%.
you've seen them, like they remove shit for no
Yeah.
reason and it's just lost. So physical
And
media,
it's
guys.
tough. Yeah,
Yep.
and it's especially tough over there because we at least have the security of it being an HBO original program. It will always be on HBO. That will never disappear.
Yep.
Whereas over there, there isn't that HBO Max. Like it's all being licensed via Wow or Sky
Mhm.
Net or whatever the fuck it's called,
Yep.
and um, so it's especially tough there. So especially if you are in Europe or across the Atlantic from us, definitely get physical media, but in general, physical media for sure.
Hell yeah.
All right, number four. What's your
Okay.
final pick?
So my final pick, because like I said, I struggled so hard, and I picked a film that I even haven't seen, and one that
Okay.
you mentioned briefly like a couple minutes ago, and that is Dumb
Oh.
Money. And
Oh, interesting. Okay.
because I think it it's similar kinda, but I know you didn't like it as much, but I just picked it, and I guess you'll talk about it briefly because I haven't seen it, but I just wanted to like find the fourth one, and I was like, this works, I think. So tell us more about it.
So I saw it maybe last month or so, which I
Yeah.
was so bummed. It's one of tell me there's nothing worse than when you rent a movie and then a week later you go on a streaming service and it's been uploaded on there. There's
Yep.
nothing worse than that. That sucks.
Yep.
Um, but I was really excited to see this because I actually like lived and was a part of this. Like I
Mhm.
was investing in GameStop when this shit was happening because I
Mhm.
remember hearing about it.
Yep.
Um, in the stock market at that time, this was like 2020. The stock market at this time was very volatile, and people were making like I was making a shit ton of money on there. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just
Mhm,
clicking buttons, buying shit, selling it later, and I was making a ton of money. It was crazy.
mhm.
Um, and and then I went on to lose a lot of money as well later on. But it was something
Yep.
that I really identified with because I was like, oh shit, like I actually kind of I was not there on the ground floor and I was not on Reddit. I'm not a Redditor. Like I'm not
Mhm.
one of those people.
Yep.
But it's one of those that I mean, I could the concept and the story. I totally get the parallel to The Big Short and could see this Gosling character loving it and totally buying in and being on board with it. I could see him buying like get me 1,000 shares of GameStop right fucking now.
Probably.
I could see him making. I could see him doing that 100% because it was kind of like that. It was the little guy was going to take over the big guy, and that's what The Big Short is.
Yep.
And Dumb Money is a fun movie and it makes it very digestible. I don't know that it's a great movie. I don't know that it's that well made, but to see that story told is really cool because I do think it's a notable point um in like American history that deserves to be told and shown, and I don't know if it was executed properly or anything like that, but I am glad they made something about it nonetheless. And for those who are not at all aware of like that or like what happened with the whole GameStop short, like I mean, I think this is a great way to sort of learn about it because it does kind of get to the nuts and bolts and it does tell you everything and it's for the most part all pretty accurate, but it's not it's just that. You know what I mean? Kind of like when I mentioned with Bob Marley, it's just a highlight reel of these things that happen without
Mhm.
really too many stakes, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those things like you watch it and you know what happened, but that's about it. Like you forget about it. It's not as memorable. It's not as fun. And I
Yeah,
still haven't seen it. I want to watch it because
you should.
I
You
didn't
should.
miss anything. I had friends who did over
Yeah.
here, but just because like I know what happened, like because I was on the internet at that time, so everyone was talking about it. So I
Yeah.
saw it from like an outside perspective. So when I heard like they're making a film about this, I was like, this is interesting. I want to check it out. Still haven't because I don't think it's
Hmm.
out here like anywhere, at least not to like
Yeah.
stream it. And but I want to watch it soon just to see what it's like. But yeah, I didn't know that you actually like were kind of a part of this. Like you, it's interesting.
Yeah, it was a very fun period because it
Hmm.
was just anything went and it was so out of the ordinary. But then you also saw such blatant corruption and they do a great job of um of displaying that in the
Hmm.
film. Um but yeah, ultimately it's not a good movie, I don't think, but it is very entertaining from what I remember. I do like it's a fun ride, and if you just want to waste, 100, an hour and 40 minutes or whatever, put it on. Why not? It's on Netflix in the States now. So
Hmm. It has Paul Dano, which I want to
he's
watch it.
incredible in it. And Pete
Okay,
Davidson plays his brother. Very weird casting, but they're
didn't
brothers.
know about that.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
fun.
And
Yeah,
then they
that
have
was.
Seth. It's okay. It's very weird the casting because then they have Seth Rogen who's playing like this hedge fund billionaire manager, and it's completely unbelievable. Like you don't believe for a second that
Mhm.
Seth Rogen is ever a hedge fund manager or this billionaire from finance. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's
That's
very
where
bad
like
casting.
they probably like chose like funny over like actual good casting. I think they probably
Yeah,
did that so it's like a comedy bit, but yeah.
yeah, and it's like Shailene Woodley plays Paul Dano's wife, and Paul Dano does a good job, but their relationship doesn't really look like it makes much sense. And his
Hmm.
brother, sure as hell, they look absolutely nothing alike and have nothing in common. Um, but there's some there's some again, it's very entertaining at the very
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. That
Highly
was my
recommend to check it out for that alone.
fourth pick, but I guess you talk more about it, so kind of making you like talk a lot three times in a row. I'm sorry, but what's your
No,
last one?
that's all right. My last one is another one that I'm gonna sort of um go out of left field from. It's
Mhm.
a documentary series
Okay.
that came out last year called Telemarketers. And this was produced by Alara Pictures, the Benny and Josh Safdie production
Mhm.
company. And it was directed by a guy named Sam Lipman Stern, who also is one of the main characters in this. And essentially, telemarketers. It was it was an HBO original through Alara. It's an Alara production, but it's like a I mean, it's like takes place over the course of like 15 plus years, I think. And it's a very it's like a dark comedy, but at the same time, it is like grimy. Like it's like dirty. It's what you would expect from like a Safdie. Like it's the most Safdie documentary ever. Like it is gritty, it's gross, but it's very fucking funny.
Mhm,
And there's a ton of heart in it. But it's these dudes who work at this call center, telemarketers,
mhm,
and like dudes are literally like snorting crack in the office. Like they're fucking like shooting up in the fucking. They're high as fuck in the office. They're drinking. They're getting drunk. They're like smoking blunts in the office. Like it's there's no rules whatsoever,
mhm,
and it documents how there's a great deal of corruption among the police across the country who are very well aware of the things that are happening in this documentary. Um, but essentially, the basic premise is that these telemarketers are calling people saying that they're a part of the Fraternal Order of Police, which is this organization that says um, they raise money for the police and it's for X, whatever they say it is. But
mhm,
ultimately, all it does is go into a fund that pays all these cops. Like they just keep the money, or they go on vacations, or they go to the casinos, or they do
mhm.
what. It's a complete fucking scam. Um, and I think I forget how many parts. My memory's telling me like 3 or 4 parts, but it might be more than that.
Mhm.
But it was one of my favorite documentaries of last year, and you know I love documentaries,
Yep.
and the whole film is this journey, and the main guy is this dude Sam, who I mentioned, but it's this other guy named Dan Pespis, or I'm sorry, Patrick Pespis, who is such a character. I mean, and you see him turn his life around too. Like he's the one who's like literally snorting pills like at his desk, and he's the number one seller.
Mhm,
And you kind of see him somewhat go straight, and then he goes missing, and it's just there's so much drama in it, but at the same time, it's really just their undying quest to take down the corruption of the telemarketing industry as a whole. The whole industry is so horribly corrupt,
mhm.
and um, it's one of those that I can't imagine again this Ryan Gosling character of Annette not looking at and finding some kind of inspiration in it because these dudes are really out here. I mean, they're filming it in real time. This dude, like in
Mhm,
when this happened in like the 2000s, like he's
mhm.
filming in the office everything on his camcorder. And he's had this idea of doing this documentary to really expose them for all these years, and it's been 20 years plus for it to
Yep.
come out. Um, and it's a really incredible doc. Dirty, grimy, like I said, very safty in every sense of the word. Chaotic, gross, funny,
Mhm.
anxious, slimy, dirt balls. Like it has everything. Um, and really in depth and just such a great documentary series. I highly recommend this.
Where
Um,
is this on? Like, where did you watch that? Is it
it was on Max. It's an HBO original
okay?
doc. Yeah.
So I gotta find what streaming service or whatever has like the rights licensing here. That sounds really interesting.
Whoever has HBO, I think you were telling me it was like Wow or something over
Yeah.
there. They likely probably also have this, if I had to
Okay.
guess. It could
Because
be
they
something
don't
completely
have
different, but
everything. That's never makes sense to me because they have like most of the things, but then some things they don't have. Like some other like streaming service have some things aren't even available, like period over here. You can't watch them at all.
interesting. Okay.
So I have to find out like where it streams because this one I have like to check out. You
This
said like
one it so
parts, 4 parts.
so it says on Letterboxd. Hold on, I'm just googling where it's streaming
Mhm.
um for you. I love how the first thing that comes up, how to watch telemarketers in Germany, it literally says download VPN, create it. So it might not be available
Like yeah,
anywhere real, but it says it's 177 minutes on Letterbox. I think it's 3 hour long episodes.
okay. So I might have
Like
to
it's
get
very
it
doable
and
if you
HBO.
find, yeah, or if you find a free trial where it is, you could easily bang this out in like one day if you had nothing to do.
For sure, yeah.
And it's very bingeable in that way because like
Mhm,
every episode ends, you're like, holy shit, I have to see what happens next, and then it wraps it up nicely in like 3 or 4 episodes.
mhm. I like those, like, documentaries that has, like, 2 or 3 parts because it keeps you invested, like, after every episode, they, like, end it on such a high note where, like, I have to see where, like, this goes. I have to see what happens next. The best ones do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and it's funny. I used to do telemarketing as well. Like in college, I did it for one summer, so there
I
is
wanted
that part of me that I can. It was
Yeah,
fucking
I wanted to
terrible. It was
say the
the
same thing, like,
worst job ever.
I worked for, like, a month or 2, and then I, like, saw what happened there. I was like, "I can't do this, like, this is not for me." And we also had people, like, snorting cocaine in the bathroom, so
Yeah,
it's wild.
it's at least they went to the bathroom. At least they were kind enough there to go to the bathroom and do it.
But
As
it's
like
Europe,
any
so
normal adult, Europe, they're
they're
classy. They have class.
they're more
Here, these
classy.
motherfuckers were smoking crack right at the desk while on the phone. It was crazy. But
Mhm,
telemarketers are the slight like same thing. I worked for 2 months, I think, 2.5, maybe three.
mhm,
And then I started to really understand the script that I was reading. And I started to understand the ins and outs. I'm like, oh, I'm scamming people. And it's not exactly a good
mhm,
feeling knowing that you are just straight up essentially defrauding people.
mhm,
Um, but it's and you will totally relate to it too. Like it is just the worst human beings on the planet. Like the most deplorable, degenerate people are the ones who get suckered into these jobs. And
mhm,
you see that they're exploited because they're going off handing off like they're situated and going to like the worst neighborhoods like in their city, like
mhm.
going to like the projects and shit, and like handing out flyers and whatever for come join us here, and they're just exploiting these people because they know they're not going to question these people who are like really down bad probably aren't going to question the ethics of our company. They're just going to show up so they can get paid and they'll be cool with that. And it's a really there's a lot of levels to it, and it's yeah, my favorite doc of last year for sure, and maybe
Mhm.
one of my favorites the last handful of years.
I can't even imagine, like, what it was like in the US because over here, we have, like, more rights, and I think it's much more strict because when I worked for, like, wasn't, like, straight up scamming people, it was for health insurance, so people would go to, like you pretty much I just would make, like, payments, and then the people would go there and they would try to scam pretty much, or, like, they did something to
I
them.
see.
They didn't
Yeah,
need, like, health insurance, like, teeth and
yeah.
something, and they didn't even want that, so it wasn't, like, straight up, but it was still, like, I kinda, like, heard some stories and I was like, "I can't," like, with my cons, like, what these people are doing to, like, especially old people, I was like, "I don't wanna be a part of this. Like, shove this money
Hmm.
up your ass. I'm out of here." But I
Yeah.
heard some wild stories, like, things in the US because I think they're allowed to do a lot more, I think, over there, like they used to be.
It's the regulations really aren't like there are regulations in place, but it's really not that strict because, and it's funny because the police one in particular, and like that one, I mean, it's still going like on. Like it's this isn't even like anything they solved. Like this is something that's continuing to happen.
But
It
they
just
just
sheds
call
light on it.
people, like, cold calls and
So
just scam them straight up.
So essentially, they offer you, and it's funny because now I see who's fallen for it now out in the public, and they
Mhm,
notice they're like there are stickers that businesses or especially old people will have on their car or in the front window of their business that says honorable whatever fraternal order of the police, and it's a sticker. And now anytime I see that, I'm like, you got scammed, you got scammed, you got scammed, but they don't know. They think it's like, oh, it's a good look to have, and so that way,
yeah,
when you get pulled over or something happened to your business or other people, if someone tries to rob you, they know that you're connected to the police, but it means
yeah,
nothing. They took your money and they went to fucking Hawaii with it.
damn. Because I
Yeah,
know a lot of people, like, in the US, they're like, the support for the cops, like, there's a lot of people that have a lot of support for them, and they have, like, the
yeah,
American flag with, like, the blue thing on their car as well,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
I think there are a lot of people that are more inclined to be like, "Oh, I wanna support, like, the police."
Exactly, exactly. And it's funny because there's a TV show. I don't know how popular it was over there, but Workaholics, which is one of my
Mhm,
favorite comedy sitcoms ever, was with Adam Devine.
mhm,
That was his breakout kind of show or whatever. He created that show. But it's so funny because I used I one of my favorite sitcoms ever. So funny. and they were telemarketers, and they have this great line is something, and I forget the name exactly, but he's like, they know when we call, like, oh, a Ruth? Oh, I'll fuck up a Ruth. If I see that I'm calling a Ruth, I'm gonna fuck her up. I'm gonna get a bag off that. And it's so true. Like, you're like an Edna, a Ruth, like some old ass
Mhm.
name. You're
Older,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I'm a Dolores. I'm gonna make a bag off Dolores or some shit,
Damn,
you know.
that's so
Um
sad.
it's funny, it's heartbreaking, but great documentary. And
Mm,
I think especially since you have a little bit of background in that as I do, we probably have an equal amount of experience in telemarketing. It makes
and good
it
for
even more rewarding of a watch.
them. Absolutely. I'll try to check this one out. I'll see where it's available. I'll find a way to watch it.
Yeah, try to find a way. Even if you got to do a VPN, I'll give you my HBO login then, so you can get the US version.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
but yeah, you want to go ahead and fire off a list off your four films for anyone who might want to write these down.
Hell yeah. So the first one was Tetris, then I had Moneyball, which we both had on our list, Dark Waters, and the last one was
There we go. And I had Blackberry, also Moneyball, the
Dumb.
TV series Succession, and then the HBO documentary series Telemarketers.
Hell yeah.
Um,
Great selection.
Again, let me shout out, yeah, from Alara Pictures. I have to shout them out. Everything they touch is just gold.
Hell yeah.
Great selection. Another great episode in the books. The Big Short. So glad Ryan Gosling was a part of this film. I really think he elevated it. But next week we shall. Let me pull it up. I don't want to fuck this
Is
up.
it
I was about to say, but let me make.
Ides of March? Or is it his
Is it the?
directorial?
I was gonna say I thought the Ides of March was like 2013 or something. I think it's Lost River if we go that route.
Is it? Okay, so his directorial debut. Hell yeah. I'm excited for this
Yeah.
one.
So
This is my most anticipated one.
so I've only seen it one time, so I'm excited to rewatch it again and for us to see it in a way where he's not on screen at all either, and we can see him work from behind the camera. So that'll be a
It's
new, interesting take on it. Um, and then the next one where he's acting in is going to be honestly one that I'm very excited to check out again. Only God Forgives.
okay. I'm excited for both. I
Yes,
have both
which
of them on Blu-ray, and I'm excited to rewatch them. And Lost River is one of my favorite films, actually. Like, it is in my
really.
100 probably because I love this film, and
Uh huh.
I'll talk about it next time. But wish he would make more films because I know this one wasn't very well received. It's a shame.
Yeah.
I think it will like get more people watching and like loving it down the line because I think it's a hidden gem. I think people will appreciate it in the future. I hope so. It's such a great one.
It is. I'm excited too. I'm excited to rewatch it again after it's been a long time since I've seen it. I
Mm.
don't know why I've never revisited it too much. I remember it being weird, but weird in a good way. Very Lynchian, sort of.
Yep.
All right. Well, another good episode. We will see you guys hopefully next week. We'll try to knock that one out a little bit quicker.
Mm.
But thank you as always for listening, Dino. Always a pleasure talking with you on the pod. And yeah, I'll see you
Likewise, bro.
soon.
It was a great episode.
All right.